This is the plan.
Hold on.
This is the plan. What we're going to do next is we're all going to sit around and we're going to talk about what the rhythm tracks have to do for the picture at the key part in the film where they really take over. Because the music up until that time sounds like all kinds of things, and it involves lots and lots of synthesis and what have you. It builds a big schmaltzy Puccini, gets really like an opera. And when the kid dies, and then from that moment on, you're in another dimension of the film, and you start to sense the rhythms. And these are the primitive rhythms that stay and dominate the track musically from that point until the killing of Kurtz. And as you go, it goes back and back and back in time. So you're hearing at first the rhythms of 1969, maybe them, but then it's 1954, then it's 1900, then it's 1600, then it's 1200, then it's 2,000 years ago, then it's 1,000,000 years ago. Because we are going into the heart of darkness, and it becomes more savage in a way, but in a way more peaceful and more beautiful.
When I first started working on the film in 1977, a lot of the film had been scored with the Doors.
In my mind.
Francis had gone to school with Jim Morrison. They'd been at film school together, although Jim had a rock group while he was at film school that turned into the Doors that became famous and took him off in that direction. Francis also knew by talking to people who had fought in Vietnam what that music meant to them, that there was an edge to it and a strung outness that reminded them of the situation that they were in Vietnam. It was eventually removed because it was almost too apt. The songs seemed to have been written by somebody who was taking a hammer and driving the point of the scene home, even though they had been written, 10 or 15 years earlier and had nothing to do with the film. That's not the function of music. The function of music is to be in a kind of parallel harmonic relationship with the film rather than to be right on the same tracks. So we removed the Doors, and yet it obviously stayed at the beginning. That's the one place that it really remained.
The Doors record company, Elektra Records, sent me what turned out to be a 4-track master. There was a discovery I made in Jim Morrison's vocal track that never appeared on the original album. It's a section that when I heard, my eyes must have popped out. He goes on at length reiterating this phrase, fuck me, fuck me, fuck me. And he repeats this over and over again against this incredible, driving sound behind it. And when I opened up that channel and heard that in conjunction with the image, it was this is fantastic. The fact that it had never been heard before, it was like discovering gold. My worry was, they won't let us use this. But I just left it in anyway and played it with it. And the times were right, and they were ready to let something like that go by. That's how it appeared in the track. As the film progressed, Francis became interested in some other ideas.
I became infatuated with Tomita's work, who was a Japanese composer.
Tomita planted the seeds of a completely electronic, synthesized score in classical terms.
I remember one very strange evening when I invited Walter Murch and I think George Lucas and a half dozen of my friends, and I said, I want to give you an experience of what I hope Apocalypse Now will be. And I sat them in the total dark and played them some of these recordings in this 5-track stereophonic sound. And they looked at me when the lights came on like, what was that? And Walter grasped it, certainly, and he was pivotal in making this 5-track sound.
Of course, in the end, Tomita did not do the music for the film, and Francis said, I'm going to do the music myself with my father, and we're going to write these things in collaboration and develop a melodic line.
My father was a very well-schooled classical composer, which I knew that if I could collaborate with him on Apocalypse, I would have the benefit of that incredible orchestral skill.
Carmine would write music. He wrote music all the time, I think. He had this stream of consciousness pouring out of him onto music paper.
At a very early stage in the project, Francis asked me who the heavyweights in the world of electronic music were. So I came up with a list of 5 names, submitted them to Francis, assuming that he would hire one of them. He actually ended up hiring all 5 of these individuals, which created this sort of amazing musical circus that went on for the next year.
There are 4 or 5 main synthesists who actually did the electronic orchestration of the melodic lines that have been laid down by Francis and his father.
We took the orchestral score of Carmine and modified it so, like, instead of the strings playing that line, the wind would play it. Instead of the bass line being the bass, the throbbing of the helicopter would be it. And we sort of replaced orchestral sounds with synthesized or real sounds.
Shirley Walker, who was a key member of the team insofar as she worked with all these synthesists, she was a classically trained pianist whose job it was to create the piano guide tracks that represented the distillation of Carmine's musical idea.
As we struggled with bringing the cues to picture, we had Carmine's writing. He'd walk in with the written page. I would perform what Carmine had written on the piano in loose sync to the picture. Francis would react to that, so that became a way to generate the actual cues for the movie.
It was an incredibly rich, diverse score for a number of reasons. There were many minds working on it simultaneously, each bringing a radically different point of view. And there were a lot of issues, both professional and personal, that surrounded all this swirling sort of creative chaos.
Okay, what we got to do is we got to listen to 13.1. We got to put it up on the 24 track and be able to isolate tracks and see what we're going to keep and what we're going to lose.
When we had our synthesis meetings, it was an attempt to focus the team.
How do you know?
I was there last night. I went to observe because I've never seen him doing it.
Okay.
So
We had all been encouraged to be as creative as we possibly could by Francis and to just try anything.
Right.
when you get to Lance coming up onto the boat, which is right in here.
Right.
Then they go to Randy Hansen.
Right.
Through
In other words,
the way-
all this melody stuff has been left
There was
out.
also
all the
a
way
layer
through
of
here.
just
Right.
sheer
And back to the
competitiveness
wall.
that was
Right.
so difficult because there was people wanting to just take over the score and be the guy who got to say, yeah, I have all the bright ideas. I'm the one who is making this work, and I want the credit for this.
Right.
I just hope they didn't take it out because they had trouble transferring it.
I'm obviously outnumbered on this.
You had this combination of high-powered, very talented, high-ego individuals all working in ways they just have never had to work before.
I'm suggesting dropping a melody, and you feel that it is. I feel that music is music. If you change it, you're changing it. You take the responsibility for changing it because you think it's right. The only difference between us and this is that you think one thing is right, and I think another is right. I
That's
think
the
you guys
best
are,
way
okay.
to have them
All
not
right.
use it.
Enough said. I don't
because-
want to argue about it anymore. I think you guys are wrong.
We had a few raging arguments over these concept of
And
orchestration.
it's not on the tape.
And you say,
It
well,
is
it's
on
that
the
little
tape.
white noise thing that's
say it's
going
little
like
Surely
white-
that's
that
your
right
ear.
there.
I mean,
Yeah.
to
Yeah, but
my
that's
ear, it's very
that's
clear. I
Francis's
can hear
ear.
every pitch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not.
Every goddamn pitch is
But
there.
it wasn't that much fun to work that way, but I think some awfully good stuff came out of that friction. Francis I found to be very musical in a dramatic way. He just had such an appreciation of the emotional power of music. And I think that's what he was always reaching for. Some of the most interesting stuff he did was the cue that he did with Randy Hansen, who was a Jimi Hendrix impersonator. Francis and Richard and Randy created just a mesmerizing, sinister, mystical cue that led you to the final moment of confrontation in the movie. The score that Carmine had written for that, and that all of us had struggled a synthesis to bring to life, just never had the raw power that that single guitar playing the simplest things did.
Randy is my lead guitar. Carmine is my symphonic, formal, mythological structure. Let me explain what Mickey Hart's doing, because you know what Mickey Hart's doing, Randy? This guy, Mickey Hart, has been a nut for collecting primitive sounds, and this was his secret project for the last 5 years. And so when I asked him to do this movie, he said, I have it, you know.
Francis was interested in the score having a rhythmic component. Mickey Hart of the Grateful Dead, a world-renowned percussionist, was chosen to be the vehicle by which this aspect of the score was to be realized.
Let's keep it going. We got to get this going now. We can't be stopping it.
He's getting together the 5, what he calls heaviest percussionists.
Got it.
And they are now assembling in Bill Graham's warehouse every known primitive sound known to man. And they're going to take the 5 hottest percussionists with video monitors all around so that they can watch the movie, and they're just going to perform the movie from beginning to end.
It was a sea of percussion instruments. Gongs, cymbals, wooden things. They were working to image, improvising basically to picture. Nothing was written. There are several places in the movie where Mickey Hart's used to give this primitive aspect to the score.
There's a pattern to the way music evolves in every film. Music is always a way of putting your mind in a certain state, and then the film allowing you to experience certain things. That's the power that music has.
There were a number of figures involved in the musical score of this movie. In the end, they all ended up being very high-level sidemen to this sort of musical circus that Francis had concocted.
All movies are collaborations of great artists working together, and any aspect of Apocalypse was that. If I'm anything, I'm the ringleader who chose them and who tried to stimulate them, and then ultimately took from what everyone had done and tried to bring together as in the fabric of the finished film.